Kathy Alice Brown is a 20-year Silicon Valley veteran and can speak both geek and business fluently. For the last 5 years, she's been an SEO and web traffic expert that has advised top brands on their online strategy. Now she works with entrepreneurs as their online marketing secret weapon by reshaping their online presence so that they get a steady stream of clients from their website even as they sleep. Oh, boy, Kathy Alice, I'll tell you something. That is something I dream about. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. And let me tell you, you're not the only one that dreams of that.
Well, I don't like technology. I have to be honest with you. I don't like it. I like what it does, and but it takes me a long time to understand how and what. And frankly, I don't want to clutter my mind with it. So if someone can show me how to do something very quick and easily, that's great. But and it's wonderful that you can speak both geek and business fluently. I mean, that's just a gift. So I guess some of the questions that we have are, why do business owners struggle with getting traffic to their website? I'm reading a book right now that talks about, fast starts and, getting online right away, even before everything is ready, because the first to the plate is the one who succeeds. So why do business owners struggle with getting traffic?
Yeah, and just let me comment on that fast start. I came out of the software world where, we would test and test and test before we would actually release a product. And really, when it comes to online marketing and websites, it really is a matter of kind of leaping before you're quite ready, because you want to get that feedback on whether your online efforts actually work. Because if you wait to perfect it, you might have figured out you've gone down the wrong path. And,
Well, that's what he says. That's what he says in the book. He says, we do it because your audience will tell you where your mistakes are so you can correct them. And that's one of the points he makes. He says, most software companies test, and by the time they're done, they're behind the eight ball. So what you're saying is something that he declares in his book.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was definitely a transition I had to make in corporate. Especially, I was the sort of geek that was implementing what the marketers needed. And, half those marketing programs were canceled. So we learned really quickly not to do a perfect job. If it was successful, we would go back and enhance it. But we learned pretty quickly that half those marketing prep, because they got feedback that it wasn't successful. And I think that's true with business owners, is that they do have that perfection mindset when it comes to a website. I can tell you mine are not perfect at all. And, they do all this effort and they do all this effort, and then they think they're done. Oh, wow, I finally launched it. Now I'm going to get all these leads. And that just doesn't happen. And, then they think, well, maybe I need to fix my website in some way. Maybe the colors aren't right, or maybe my copy isn't quite right. And, or maybe there's technically something wrong with their website. And, for 15% of cases I see, there might be something technically wrong, that Google doesn't like it or something like that. But a lot of them, they've kind of gotten into the ballpark, and it's really the case that they need to do that marketing to get that feedback. And that involves online activities beyond a website.
Well, that's true. That's true. So what are some of the ways you think people need to take? What are some of the ways to get traffic to a website?
Well, there's lots of ways, and they all have their pros and cons. The three main ways is, the first is partnering up with like a joint venture partner, and have them email their list, and have a link that goes to your website. Make an offer of some sort through a JV partner, and that's actually one of the fastest ways to get traffic. Of course, there's always paid traffic. So Facebook ads are really popular, and it doesn't take a lot of money to get started there. And then there's always search engine optimization, SEO, and that's really the slowest ways. I like to think of that as more of a supporting way for a lot of entrepreneurs rather than what you lead with.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because people still talk about SEO all the time. So is it still relevant? Is it still that important? People talk about having, the keywords in your headline on the website, in your list of things that you do. I mean, how important is SEO today?
Well, the landscape has changed pretty darn drastically. A lot of things that we used to do don't work anymore. I think basic SEO is still important. You still want Google to be able to crawl your site, and I still see sites that really break that. I think the copy on your websites, your title tags, your meta tags, and the copy on your website, it needs to match at least somewhat to the searcher's intent. So I think it's important to use nouns in your copy. So Google isn't smart, but it's not like incredibly, it's not like us, it doesn't intuit a bunch of stuff. So you definitely need to call out what you're talking about, and hopefully those terms, whether it's dog training or whatever it is, and hopefully those terms match up what searchers are actually typing into Google. I would say SEO is definitely still relevant. I definitely do believe that you need some sort of a collection of foundational articles on your site that address the top questions your prospect might have. But I think unless you're a larger site that has a lot of pages, it's something that should work in conjunction with other online marketing activities.
So why do you recommend keyword research for sites that are
I
not
rec-
using it?
I recommend it because it really is part of market research. You got to know your prospect. You got to get inside your head. And, I even recommend you go so far as build a little avatar. This is Fran. She's a freelance writer. She's looking for, technology help, and you almost really have to have that picture of your prospect. And that's something you can refine over time. And the reason why keyword research is really important is you need to know the language that your prospects, prospective customers or clients use to describe what they're looking for.
Well, I think that's true. I actually created 3 separate avatars because I feel there are 3 separate types of women who might be approaching my site. So I've done 3 of them, and it gets a little bit hairy that way, but there really are 3 different avatars. So what do you look for when you look at a site?
There's a couple things I check for in my tune-up services. I mean, if you're not ranking for your brand or your name, I mean, that's usually an indication that something's wrong. I mean, it's tougher to rank for, a non-branded keyword. But putting aside, maybe some technical problems, would say the first thing I focus on is to check the benefits to the visitor are very clear. Because a lot of people just list their services, but they don't really list the benefit those services have. Like what am I going to get from that service? And again, that it's in line with searcher intent and it kind of matches up with keywords and language that a searcher or, someone who came to your site via an email, the language they would use to describe what they're looking for.
So what is a top question that you get about online marketing?
It's always about how can I get leads. It's always, I just did a survey.
Isn't it interesting? It is, and so whether you're working with a corporation or an entrepreneur or a small business owner, it's always how do I get leads.
It always how I get leads. I mean, one thing I find interesting is there's a lot less emphasis on how to convert those leads, which I think is also really, really important. But yeah, I just ran a survey of my list, and again, that was the top question: how do I get leads? That's my top concern.
Isn't that interesting? That yeah, it's a very good point, Kathy Ellis. It's people don't worry about conversion. Just how many leads can I get in? The problem is a lot of people leave those leads in the funnel. They never get to process them because all they're interested in is how many can I gather, but they don't necessarily have a follow-up campaign or something that will convert them over to a real customer, not just a prospect. You're absolutely right. So what about offline marketing? I've got my own opinion on this, but I want to get yours. Do you think offline marketing is dead?
Oh no, not at all. Especially if your business has any sort of local presence. I mean, even if you don't, you are, you can work from anywhere, but if you actually go and network locally, or if you actually are a bricks and mortar, offline market is definitely not dead. I mean, going back to talking about paid advertising, whether it's paid social like Facebook ads or it's like pay per click on Google AdWords, it can behoove some people to start with their local area, even if it's not really like a local business. A, it's a lot cheaper, and B, maybe, in your particular case, you provide a one-on-one service, and there's just people out there that would rather meet you by person or at least by phone. To close the deal. I mean, I know that when I hear, oh, you're in the Bay Area, that's where I live. It's like, oh, that's cool. We should meet for coffee. And so I think in-person contact is just still the most powerful way to build a relationship. And building those relationships, they're part of marketing. That relationship may turn into a joint venture. It may turn into a referral. So I think you got to do both, and it's a dance sometimes.
Well, it's interesting because the philosophy that, and I'm going to use the word direct marketers have, is the fact that now, since more people are not mailing and more people are going online, the mailboxes are not as crowded as they were. So that when you do offline marketing, and especially if you do direct mail, people are paying greater attention to it because they're not getting as much mail. So when they do get something and it's designed well and it appeals to them and they are the proper target, that they get much more results from the offline marketing than they ever thought they did before. So I think that's an interesting prospect. But what do you think is the key aspect of an online sales funnel? And maybe you need to explain a sales funnel to our listeners.
Right. So an online sale, let's start there. So an online sales funnel is, let me just give an example of one. So, and we both touched on it in our previous conversation. It's, let's say you get to a site and there's like download my checklist, and it's like, okay, I'd love to download your checklist, to figure out, okay, here are the 7 ways you can close that prospect. So it's like a sales script or some kind of checklist. And so when you download it, you actually give your name and email address up in exchange for downloading that, sort of one kind of key piece of information that you are really interested in learning. And at that point, you're on that person's list, and an online sales funnel just basically can take that person through a series of conversations. Maybe at that point, after they download that checklist, they may be offered, oh, maybe a low value product. Well, $37 you can get my audio that will teach you that sales script. It has an interview. It really will help you refine your sales script when you're actually talking to a prospect on the phone. And then, it's a dance between, web pages that make offers, but also emails. That once you're on the list, that you'll get these periodic emails that will encourage you to take some action. And that's usually clicking on something to get to a page that might offer, that might have you sign up for a webinar. That's a really popular part of funnels these days, is to invite a prospect to a webinar. It might even invite somebody like a live event. I mean, we were just talking about, um, people sort of ignoring the power of live contact, but I think people sort of still yearn for that. So I've seen funnels that